Okay, so what I'm showing here is kind of a matrix of testing protocols that we're looking to institute here in order to, we'll say, hand over to a client. You know, we see the minor requests from a client coming in of, hey, can you tweak my mapping? Can you add this one field? Can you do this? Those are things that I would consider a minor mapping. Major mappings are things like, hey, I have these 20 things I want you to do, or I have a new file, you know, stuff like that. Form updates are whenever the form team sends us a new form to be tested. So like, for example, the schema updates that came in last month. Synapse updates, that's when like Matt Raid's team releases a new release. NXT product updates, that's when like Sujesh and Greg Smith have a new release. And then UAT handover, that is the point of your mapping work ending and a client seeing it for the first time. All of these are different styles of updates that require different levels of QC associated with what we're doing. And I think just like anecdotally, a lot of this is driven off of some recent projects where we've had, where we just say, hey, I'm done, you know, dust our hands off, move on. We have been, time and time again, client has said the quality of our work has not been that great. We all know that you guys have been busting your butts. The work has been very, you know, a lot of work has been gone into this. Sometimes it's the client's fault by not giving you specs, whatever, but we're trying to at least control what we've built to spec and controlling the changes that we are making. So what are we trying to do here? Well, there's different things that we can do to check and the level of efforts associated with them that we're going to try to do. So everyone knows the old school form model check, right? So I go in the form model, I made a mapping, it's in the form model. Nice little quick sanity check on there. Very valuable test. However, I'm just going to ask, you know, the audience here, why is that not the silver bullet of testing? You know, what are some things we've ran into recently when we just checked the form model, but you know, it didn't help when a client received the mappings?
It's going to be hard to make sure you caught everything.
So it's going to be hard to make sure you caught everything. Keyword there's everything. I'm going to point to somebody sitting in the front row.
Just merely form test, like form
model. So I hit select star form model, or you know, the form model query, yeah. And I saw that my mapping change or my new mappings are in there. Why is that not always the best handshake to a client?
It's possible that the data may not, there's between like the GUIDs to the portfolio IDs, it may not actually show up on NXT, so you
Sure.
can't just validate your Synapse without validating on the UI for, you know, so.
Anyone else? They can't see the form models. That's really the easiest answer, right? No client is going in the Synapse and looking at it. They're going off the faith of Confluence that we did the mapping right. Now, we're all kind of a bit jaded with this process because we were building in the dark for a long time, right? We didn't even have a form when we were doing mappings earlier in the year. And so this is the only thing we could do. It's still a very valuable test, and I'll show you kind of a way that we can do some of this in the future. But right now, it's not the only test we should do when we do minor mapping tweaks. So one of the new things I'm going to be suggesting is something like a record count. So right now, clients go in and say, I expect 100 derivatives. You know, there's 100 in my file, and when we send them a file with 99, they're like, why didn't you catch this? Well, I did a form model update. I saw that my mappings are good. I have derivatives in there, but is the volume in there? Is the expectation out there? What are some things we can do to ensure completeness, not always just accuracy? You know, the one thing that we don't do with everybody right now is something like we're calling an XML diff. So why can't we do an XML diff for import? Like, why couldn't we do an XML diff in import in June?
Oh, I know this one. There's
no
previous XML for export.
Yeah. So Rob said there's no XML to diff against. We had our one from the application, and that was the golden source. If we're doing BCL, U11, CPO, PF with a client, that's an existing solution. They should be able to give us a previous filing's XML. We have our application's XML, and we should be able to compare like in Notepad++ or some other proprietary tool. And that's cheating. I mean, I mapped all of this stuff. My answers are different. Crap. Something's wrong. And we'll show that. I have UI reviews in here. So UI reviews, that's the eyeballs test, right? I go in there, I made a mapping change, I refreshed a fund, I saw something. And I kind of divvied out in small and large. Small is, I made one mapping change. The client's expecting one more record to show up. They're expecting this answer to change. Large is, I'm clicking through all my tabs and making sure things are sane. I don't expect anyone to go into the UI and check all the fields. There's easier ways to do that, and we can talk about that. But nobody's going to go in there and check the whole entire thing. Excel review, small and large. Excel review. So we have Excel reports in the application, right? We have the summary reports. Why aren't those always good as the only test? Yeah, we've ran into issues where the UI has been different than Excel. Same thing with the floor models. Small and large, once again, checking if my one answer is correct that I made a change for, or making sure that my whole entire filing is correct. And I'll show you ways how to make that a lot simpler. And then just some minor tests, right? Manage reporting entities. Good example of that is today, I think I was working with Rob on somebody was saying, hey, I have funds that should be in the system. If we're setting up some sort of DM fund stuff, you probably will need to smoke test that section. Clients do a review of exception counts. I don't really find too much value in exception count volumes. They're good to say, hey, if you follow their spec and you're getting exceptions, that is a missed spec, not necessarily wrong mappings. And that's what I think that's a good barometer to say, I think I know how the client's going to react, but it should not really ever be a full vetting of your mapping success if you're going off specs. If you have no specs, and it's something we have to put together, then yes, that could be a potential barometer for that. I see a confused look on Jordan's face.
Well, no, I'm just thinking that it could also be a useful thing for kind of more incremental changes, right? It's not super helpful when you're going 0 to something now, but when you have just a particular kind of issue, you're then working do something to resolve that issue. You can look at, okay, did I resolve that particular exception? Do I have fewer of that specific?
Yeah, and I think what I'm going to show you here in a second is there are ways we can automate that in a larger fashion, and using some tooling that's existing in the application rather than just going in there and seeing exception counts decreasing. And then the final one here is more or less for the smoke tests. So updated functionality testing, right? So I have a new release, I have a hot-headed client, or I have a client that's that's pretty keen on a piece of functionality. Going through the release notes and checking out the new stuff that's out there. So what I kind of have out here is a matrix of what I would think is a minimal viable amount of testing when we do these different styles of updates. So the goal is for minor things to be an extra 10 minutes of work, extra half hour. Major mapping and UAT handoffs should be extensive. There is no excuse. This is regulatory reporting. It's not qualitative stuff. It is, I have wrong answers. That is unacceptable because it's going to the SEC. So all projects, future going, will have, we'll call it some sort of blackout period buffer between map end and UAT for us to do our own testing. And I'll show you how some of these tests that we're going to be doing. This is not optional. This is the new world order.
Well, I'm going to go postal.
Okay?
You're going to go postal.
when we do these things, we are going to be formulating a process. It's a small process. It's not, here's your 50 items checklist. It is going to be prove that you did this. And the package of testing, come on, Chanel. What? You're wearing your thoughts on your face here. You're just choking. Okay. Okay. It's things that when we're doing these updates, we need to make sure that we can prove that we've made the change that we incurred. Yeah, right now we're doing probably one of these things. We're going in the UI. We're going in the form model. I would like for some checks and balances to this stuff because that's been proven to not be the only thing we can do, and it's not what the client is doing on their review. All right. So, for example, Jake, we have schema updates that we're doing for JP Morgan. They've given us 3, right? It's like the default mappings. I consider those minor changes, right? It's not your whole entire thing's being disrupted. You're probably going into some sort of IM position snap, tweaking a couple default mappings, and there's a very predictable result. Things are now NAs. Things, 9 zeros, no longer the QSUB. You should be able to kind of eyeball that. You should be able to make sure that impact happens. But the thing is I know that JP Morgan handles every other position but swaps in one lane, and they handle swaps in another. And you went in there and you changed just the vanilla holdings thing, and then the swaps were out there. But you went out there and you checked the fund, and the very vanilla fund had all their stuff turned NA. How can we do this in math? I want to make sure that we have a very non-invasive way to do this for you guys. Major mappings. I don't know. Somebody wants to integrate with ICE, and they've been an MSCI client forever. How do we test it? Those are some things you might break other things in the process of changing. It's not one line item. It's a whole new data flow. It's a whole new lane of mapping. We need to expand our testing, and we need to make sure we set that precedence with the client as well. Form updates. This one's a little bit, the current endpoint schema update's a good example. It's a bit of a large example compared to what we expect in the future. But, hey, we've added these new fields. Make sure those new fields work. We added these new validations. Let's make sure those work. Synapse is a very lightweight test. I mean, that is form and function. That is you going in, clicking buttons, making sure things are functioning as intended. Check a few form models, check the functionality, make sure nothing fluctuates. Product update's a bit bigger. I mean, depending on what the product updates are, they do their own regression testing, but they don't do regression testing against client data. They do it against client-like data. If we have clients that have expected behavioral changes, we should be catching a lot of that stuff in our smoke testing as our overarching testing, and we'll have designated people to do that. But if you have a client that's in mid-implementation, you better check. Okay. And then UAT handoff. This is the one that we absolutely have to follow. This is a very verbose check that we will have to check. I want to make sure we have lots of checks and balances before the client ever sees things. Clients review the UI. Clients review the Excel reports. Clients aren't checking XML, and clients aren't checking form models, but we know that those are usually the most golden source on each side of those bookends, but they're in the middle there. We got to start catching things in that middle area before they start catching things as well. Yeah. Questions, concerns about the process, about some of these new rules? Eric.
So this seems to be for changes that are made to existing mappings. How would this process be different? Because we are implementing a lot of new forms and doing some of the mappings for the first time. Would the process look different in the case where you're doing an initial mapping of a file or from end to end?
So let's take an existing client that's in that stage, like Mitsubishi, right? So Mitsubishi, we're building in phases based off data availability. We're doing handoffs with the clients in like an agile fashion where it's, hey, you can check this, hey, you can check that. I would expect, oh geez, this UAT handover to happen every time that happens. It should not be as big because of the volumes of data that we're handing over in those smaller chunks, but this is the period, this is the day lag between you being done and them getting it. I don't want to see project plans that have, I end this day and the client sees it that same day. That's a good question. So, people on the phone, I don't know if you heard Eric's question, is what happens whenever clients in mid-implementation, what kind of testing should happen on those handoffs? And I extrapolated that there might be multiple handoffs. Same thing with new product releases in the middle of an implementation. I mean, if you have a new product release, somebody's going to go out there and smoke test it for you guys. But if there's something that you feel like is you're on those calls, we have enhancement lists with these clients as well. I would like to get in the habit of making sure we ensure that some of these enhancements are in as well while we're in implementation. Sarah, is that a question?
I don't know.
Okay.
There are some clients that don't let us refresh on our side.
Mm-hmm.
I know I have like two that I can think of like off the top of my head.
Sure.
Obviously, so if it's something that I would like relay to them that we assume that it's fixed, I can always go as far as let me go.
That's a good point. Is this UAT as well? You can't refresh UAT? I should have put a big asterisk on this. We're not mapping in production anymore. I'm sorry. If we have a client pushing back on that, they can talk to me. That's going to add additional overhead as well. And if IT pushes back because of the volume of production that UAT moves we're doing, once again, they can talk to me. They would probably actually be happy because it mitigates risk. But for clients that push back, we can have a conversation. In UAT, they should be a little bit more willing about us refreshing. We should still get permission. We should still lay out the run rules of this. And if for some reason these clients are pushing back on us refreshing their UAT region, you lay out the risks. All right, sorry, we're going to miss stuff. I can't do a full review of your stuff. We're relying upon you to do more review, more UAT. Are you comfortable delivering those messages?
My job easier.
Yeah. I mean, I know we have a few, I'm not calling anyone out specifically, it's not your fault, but we do have some clients that still feel like live surgery in the production region's an okay scenario. I think City's one of them. It's like, no, you guys are big enough to know that that's a problem. And even if it's like, hurry up, I need this today, that is a few and far between request that we're not going to always validate against, because there might be some better solutions. Okay. Any other questions about this? And there's going to be a more formal process. Some emails will go out. We can have a secondary session about how we're going to do the handshake. In the handshake, I'll show you kind of what we can do when I show you the actual testing. Cool? All right. So I kind of broke these out into different categories, but I'm not expecting anyone to go form model review and then record count and XML diff. We can group some of these types of testings together to make them one-stop shop kind of stuff. So mapping updates, so not brand new mappings. The goal of that is change control, right? So I have an existing mapping today. I have a new mapping tomorrow. What happened in between that? So regression testing. I can see what I changed in my little tunnel. I know that I changed my swaps to behave differently, but I just blew up equities. But I'm not looking at equities, so I wouldn't know. So what are some things you can do? So the first thing I kind of want to show you is that while we have some of these spikes of testing, you know, a lot of you are technical. Think about what you would need to do to test something en masse. What are your problematic things? What are things that change over time when you update mappings? So what's a common scenario when you update a mapping that you've seen problems with? Go ahead.
Integrating new files into IM positions.
So like IM positions, sorry Jordan, it's a rat's nest sometimes. It's a lot. It's hundreds of lines of SQL nested in each other and stuff like that. And yes, it makes sense, but the second a human touches it, it could break. And you're in a section that groups things together and you updated the swap or something like that, and you might not realize that you just filtered out all the some other holding, or and you added every holding that never wanted to see in the thing there in the first place. So counts. Lack of holdings, additional holdings. I had 900 today. I now have 901, or I have 899. Value. So that's completeness testing. The other one, just general values. So I'm doing arithmetic changes within the database, or my market values. I'm changing how those behave, and those are just quantitative values changing. So what I have up here on the screen is just something I put together in 15 minutes for IM positions, or not IM positions, FM import positions, where all this query is doing is I know that we have a lot of problems with sec lending showing up in people's filings because of that's a third party coming in. Derivatives, always a good fun time with derivatives kind of coming and going within a filing. And this is just something I started, so you can ignore that. But like reference instruments not showing up. And then just general summations of any value in Part C. So what this query does is I could just take this and I could pop it in any client region and say, I haven't started mapping today. I haven't made a single change in the database. And I go in there, I think I'm in JP's, in their UAT. I pop this in here, I put this little query together, and I only have it for a couple, oh yeah, this is UAT, it's only a few months. But like, I have 786 holdings in total. I have no sec lending. I have 6 futures. I have, all this other stuff, right? And then I did a couple computations of some of the value fields. That's today. I go in there. I make 1,000 changes in the database. I am expecting to bring in some FX forwards. It was 0 today. I run this query again tomorrow. I now have 10. I have 100. I have 1,000,000. And I expect 1,000,000. I don't have to go in any single database. I don't have to go into, go through, pull, select star, FM import, find the GUID, find the da-da-da-da, and, this took 15 minutes of work, and it's a nice diff between periods, between mappings. It'd be great if product would do something about this, but I think there's some things ahead of it in the queue, but it'd be cool to see stuff like this. So this is like a form model review. This is like the equivalent of you doing what you've been doing since the beginning of time. I love these little things. Throw them out in your client folder. Put them in the helpful queries folder. This one's already out there. Steal mine. Make it bigger. Do something else. But before you start mapping and after you map, this is a great way to see what the changes are. Anyone else think anything that could be included in here that would be a nice toolkit? Maybe like a Part B one? Maybe one that's more explicit for, I'm doing sec lending work, so this one pulls Part B and it reconciles Part C against it. I know we have validations in the form to do a lot of that stuff, but...
I just know for unrealized gain loss for import, that's a huge one where they're defined, or at least for B5C, they're defined by these asset instrument types. It's helpful to not only know like the total value, but how that value is being attributed to the category.
Sure.
So that's pretty important.
And here so that's 2 minutes of your time. Now let's say, okay, I want to extrapolate more on stuff like that, right? And I'm not a SQL guru. I am not, anything more than that, and I don't intend to be.
You say yes, Brian. Yes.
This is it's so easy I can do it. So, but I know Excel. But it's Excel, but I know Excel. I'm a fund accountant by trade. You can do this stuff in Excel too. You can dump things out of set apps, pop it in Excel form, and do a diff.
Tables are your friends.
What's the Bill Gates quote? Hire a lazy man because he'll find the most efficient way to do something. You're overthinking this. I type in a word here, compare. Oh, look at that, spreadsheet compare 2013. Who knew that even existed? Oh, it's a standard tool in Office. This is a multi-tab comparison file. I can go into, oh, look here, I have,
Brian's been holding out.
you know, I'm now in the UI. I downloaded this, I'm in UAT, I refreshed 2 funds, I regenerated 2 funds because of my mapping changes. Part C is unreviewable by a human, you know, in mass. You can go and find your little values that you changed here and there with the filter functionality that was released this month, but I made swathing changes in the database. So if I go into, let's see, I think I already have a pre-baked cake here. Let me see if I can find it. You know, principal here, principal here. I think these will work. Oh, wait, sorry. The one you download out of the application, you have to reset. So the way that the thing, sorry. When you download the summary reports from the application, they're written in some weird way that they are not ingestible by other applications. I'm sure our clients have pointed that out to us before. Sounds like, yes. It's easy as just resaving it, though. Oh, I'm comparing workbooks, and like, you know, I started building out my own to make comparisons, and now I have I have two spreadsheets with, I think, what, like 30 tabs on each one. Here's my 5 differences. Oh, jeez, that's not the button I meant to press. Lord. Look, yeah, somebody changed the URL. Somebody did this, that, and the other. Another 2 minutes of testing. We can ask the client, give me your nastiest funds with the ones that are affected most by these changes. We download the summary reports. We just do a compare. Okay. The last but not least, but the most valuable once clients start filing stuff is just XML diffs. So right now, this is not applicable to import, but you know, CPO, BCL, we have XML files for them. We say, hey, can you give me those XML files for a prior period? And then if I have a data set for a certain period in the application, I generate it, I load it, I hit extract the XML, pop them into Notepad++, do a compare, and I get comparisons. But I know what people are saying, right? So, because we saw it with BCL, we saw it with MFP. What if my client's ordering is different? You know, some of these tags don't matter. The answer to that is, Bill, can we get budget for another XML compare tool? Yeah. So there are solutions out there. Sujesh built one himself. We've been leveraging that here and there. I don't want to pay him royalties, so we should probably find something else. But we can worry about that later. And it's horseshoes and hand grenades, right?
The only weakness of this Notepad++ compare is that we can't save the comparison at all.
True.
It just exists as is in the application like this.
Very true. So yeah, you cannot save your diffs, but it's still a good sanity check for now until we figure out a better long-term solution. But everything I just did here took, I don't know, 5 minutes apiece. Yeah, client says, here's my update. I don't see. Do you see any of this being heavily invasive? I mean, the most invasive part is I found that my work is wrong and I have to do something, right? But that's where that client's going to go to you and say, issues 1 through 1,000 on my UAT tracker, and you said, well, I found it now and I'm going to work on these now. Clients aren't going to be scared when you say, I found some things that were, you know, some misspecs. I found some things and I'm going to be working on those. And time saved now is time saved on the back end. We're not going to be able to test like accuracy on, we're not a fund accountants by trade. We're not going to be able to go in there and ensure that the NAV calculation or AM calculation is appropriate and it's, accounting for interest dividends and the NAV. No. But we're technical people. We know 1 + 1 = 2. And we know that if I look at all my holdings, it should sum up this. Build out your own test suite to save your butt in the future. What are some other ideas? What are some other things you guys are thinking about to make your lives easier in the excitement that is UAT?
I've been doing this. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but it makes my life a little bit easier. But when there's like tables that we have that have unions in them, for data flow, there's like 3 or 4 or 5 unions. And each of those I have there's a field I put on that table called a source table indicator, and it tells me, from which table it is.
Okay.
When we have a preview, we have 20,000 records in there. We don't know which thing came from what.
Yeah.
It tells us. So if I load something in, like you said with the counts, if I know that there's 20 more.
Yeah.
B and Y in the second or whatever, it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. So Sebastian was saying that he's using some of the functionality to help identify where information is being kind of collated together to identify what additional information is kind of joining into the mix. You brought up a point that I didn't even think about. So, a client is entering into their UAT. There might be value in pulling down the graph, the map, and you just do a quick eyeball of it, and sometimes they're a little messy. There's things not connected. There's things that just exist in their own little orbit. There are ways you can kind of do this to ensure, just visually, they're out there. What else?
I think that building out SQL queries is a really powerful way to do things. I like having the kind of repository of, helpful stuff that Brian was kind of alluding to, although, I think that ultimately won't, that's, again, like everything else that we're talking about, it's not a silver bullet. I think a lot of the time, like when you're tasked with an item on the UAT tracker and there's a very specific thing you want to accomplish, I think it's really powerful to be able to know that, okay, this impacts field X and or model Y, so let me build a query that's going to see what's going on, like, maybe the issue is that all my futures are missing counterparties. Well, I can build a query that says, look for futures only and tell me if this has a counterparty or not. Run that before, do my updates, run it after, see if I still have anything that pops up in that. So, I think that's incredibly useful as far as, at least an initial test with your mapping.
Yeah, and so people on the phone, so Jordan brings up a good point. I'm not a developer, but I know some development practices, and when people are doing development, you have an intention of what you're coding for, and it's an end result. But while you're building your code, you're also thinking about how you can automate your test as well. So while I'm saying I need to update all my futures, build out a view, a select statement that pulls futures, and have it in your little Notepad++ repository, and you publish one thing, then you run over the Data Explorer, you pop that in there, and you validate your results real time. Having a scratch pad of just like QA stuff while you are building is just monumental, and making it available to everybody else helps with the the ability to get somebody ramped up on a project quicker. I have a toolbox already. I'm just gonna steal those tools. Okay.
Did we? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Dan was just stretching, I thought.
Oh, no.
What's up, Dan?
So you said, the process of, updating the mapping, publishing it, going to the Data Explorer and validating it.
Mm-hmm.
But before you can do that, you have to drop a file to get it to kick off, so it actually goes into, so the changes go into the file.
Sure.
I mean, for me, when I'm going through it, I'm trying to do that validation before I drop the file and actually put it into the form.
How do you do that?
I mean, right now, I basically do the preview results, export the preview, and I do, filtering on the export to go through and make sure that the changes in the set path. So, I'm just saying that I guess those pre-made queries that you have, which I agree are really helpful, like when you're trying to go through, especially if you're doing initial check. But a lot of times you want to do that validation before the actual file drop. So that's something difficult to do in the preview.
Sure. I think that's me being a bit ignorant to the mapping process. Is I was just assuming that was part of our mapping process. If you're just blindly typing in code and not hitting preview before and validating your results before you publish, that seems
Part of it's right.
scary. Shooting from the hip, Jordan.
One thing you can always do there, it takes a couple extra minutes with it, but put it in the subquery, right? So the thing that you built is going to populate a model. So we get the same effect if you just say, if you have your whatever Brian validation checks that you want to run against it, you can put everything that you've just built that's in your data flow code. You can throw that into a subquery in Explorer, and then in the main query you can run those checks against that. That's what it is. But it does take a couple extra minutes to do that all.
What's a subquery?
That's where instead of selecting from a table, you select from another.
Select.
Double select.
Okay.
That's select statement.
So, I wasn't talking about like blindly. Because, when I'm doing validation, putting in the mapping change, and then, like I said, exporting the results, I'm doing spot checks. I'm not doing like comprehensive validation because that would take a really long time. In a lot of cases, it would take so I'm checking like, I expect this here, and if it's here, if it's working here, I assume that it's working.
Sure. Could you?
So it's not as comprehensive as validation.
Could you hit preview results before you make any changes, and then do it again? Hit preview results, and stick it in the spreadsheet compare.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else people are thinking from just how I can better review my work?
One, I don't know if it's too extraneous or off the wall. Did we say in the schema updates that we are adding the position ref ID to the IM position?
So, in the schema, or you're talking about in front of the form, right? Yeah.
We say schema.
Yeah. The answer is, who asked in Slack the other day?
What?
About the position. I think somebody said, it might have been you. No. About the client IDs, right?
Yeah.
Are we putting that out there? Is this something different?
No, the position ref ID that, like for Part C and FM position snap, we have the position ref ID, which is comprised of snap date, payout profile, portfolio, and initial ID.
Yeah.
I thought I heard something like that's going to be put on to the IM. Is that mishearing thing?
I haven't heard anything.
Okay,
like
well then what I did still counts then, because what I did was I made a if we did that, then what I did doesn't really make much sense to do.
Well,
but with for City, I don't know if anyone else, but because it can get confusing, when you see a position ref ID, someone says, you look in the UI and you see this internal ID, and that doesn't go with anything for anything else aside from the form model and everything. So we made this instrument ID, the position ref ID model IM that kind of, puts everything together. So we have, it shows what instrument ID links to what position ref ID.
I love that. So, Mr.
Use that in the,
Yeah.
So you use that in the query when you're looking at Data Explorer, and you want to find, I see that these repos aren't showing up correctly, and I have these 5, position ref IDs, and so I select all of my, everything from my intermediate model, where, or, interjoin with the position ref ID model.
Sure.
Where the position ref ID is this, that, right now.
I think that is a huge thing. So, Mr. I Hate Goo is over here. What about some sort of, model storage QA thing, right? Here's my keywords. Here's how they all play together. Adam Boyce, I know he's not on the call, but brand new to this process, identified that being a problem for his implementation for, I think it was BCL or U11 for NT, and wrote them out and said, position, whatever, here's all my keywords, and saw how they all played together. We could probably automate a lot of that by just building a standard query to pull all that together and find commonalities, to find lineage, to find relationships. I didn't even think of that. I mean, that's huge. That's you probably can build one out to see, join on this, and all of a sudden one of the columns is completely blank, and you just found out that the smoking gun of why sec lending underliers aren't showing up. And it's because I can't join up on the positions because it's looking at something completely different. We've ran it 1,000 times on JP Morgan. Yeah. So shouldn't that be part of the business analysis? Yes. I think that's out the gate, defining what your keywords are. But we're human. We type in keywords that there's no IntelliSense on model storage. You type in any keyword you want, it's not going to tell you what the right one is. So maybe just making a query that has all of your GUIDs in there and the interrelations, and then you click that and you can see where they fall out. I'm not smart enough to build that, but I think you guys are. I think if you know that this is how my data flow structure works, it's probably one query. Maybe two. Maybe a subquery, I don't know. Does that make sense? You finding out where things fall out in your GUIDs, that's a good tool. Couple more. So just think like a client. When you look at your UAT trackers, what are some common things that just kind of come out? I mean, right, wrong mappings, duplicate positions. Do you think these things will help find those things before them?
It's classification or improper aggregation.
So proper aggregation. So how I'm doing very dumb things in this query, right? I have add up total market value, extrapolate that, make it by asset type.
Right. Yeah, classification, whatever.
I mean, the beauty is you're following a schema. Eric builds it. Ian gets to steal it. And then whoever the genius is that can join this against the summary report, I'll give you pizza for lunch. I mean, it's all about the interplayability across the application.
Yeah. Create a source model.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, if whoever creates the summary report importer gets a job with dev. So think about it. We map to the form model. Clients look at the UI sometimes. They absolutely use the Excel report, and then the XML is the ultimate truth that goes to the regulator. Finding a way to join all that up in your review will get you exactly where you need to be, and that's why I'm saying you don't just do one of these things when we hand it over to the client. There's no silver bullet. We have to do a bit of a combination of all these things to get the most coverage possible. All right. Any questions, concerns? People on the phone, in the room?
When does it start?
Yesterday.
So.
Okay, and then we're saying yesterday. And what is absolutely mandatory?
So, great question. So, we are putting together the process. I want the process to be lightweight, meaning that when you do this work, this is all stuff you can save. save it. Make sure that you can say, I have done my diff, I have done my review. It's in the client folder on the BCU. We don't have to extract it every time, but put it out there, save it, and then that's your proof that you did your work. So knowing the work that we have out there right now, some of them have project plans, some of them are just like at a bucket of hours, some of them are wherever they are. I absolutely know this is for Mitsubishi, for Northern Trust, and BBH-BCL.
Working on it.
This is something we need to start instituting for clients like JP Morgan, some clients that, Gemini. Let's start dipping our toe in this. I know we have project plans that are out there right now that would be a bit of a risk to start injecting some of this stuff, but there's no reason we can't do the small stuff on some of these projects.
Who would we be notifying? I mean, leads, obviously.
Yeah. What do you do now when you're done with the mapping? Tell the client immediately?
After I look at it.
Dancing hamster in the Slack channel.
Yeah, dancing hamster in the Slack channel. There should be a pause between you finishing your work and you telling the client, and it's qualifying it. And if I'm on your project, like if Jake says I am done, I'm going to click in there, I'm going to take a peek at it, I'm going to say that looks about right. I trust Jake, I trust you guys. A client comes back and says, prove that you did that work, I should be able to grab those files, take them on the BCU, give it to them and say, no, we did what you did, what you asked us, and here it is.
That's just happened to JP, because we made data dictionary updates for swaps, started to use new fields, and when they provided me the files, we made the updates. They were tested in UAT, and for a couple things, they noticed everything was blank.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was whatever file they first provided us with the new mapping updates, all the values, they were essentially no values.
But if you ran that query before you did your mapping and then you ran it after, it would be blank both times, right?
No.
No?
No, because it was like they took the information out of the sec relative file, so it was like there was information.
Oh, yeah.
They switched where they were sourcing the info from, and then it wasn't even in the.
But your testing would have at least told that story, right?
Okay.
That's the point. It's not, haha, point your finger, I told you so, or
Yeah.
it's validating something before a client does.
What it was is that.
Yeah.
So, Barry?
This is really more of an issue, not an issue, but I guess a challenge with CPO especially is we have these sections of the form that are just massive aggregations.
Yeah. Ooh, good question.
And so just by doing a diff, we probably want to bring it back to the intermediate model, which is why I asked the question like how they look different for full models that are coming before the form model. I guess that would have to be, you could create a query, do some diff on the IM CPO P-star positions and do that, but like a client would probably need that information. Like BCL, John created the models in a way that pull in all of the holdings information and breaks it all out so that BBH can look at it and say, for these holdings, they go into this field, and this is how it's mapped.
And I think that's a good point, but at the same time, don't sacrifice efficiencies of mappings just to accommodate the output for a client. It might be more efficient, speedy, it might be more accurate to do it differently, not extrapolate it in some intermediate model, but you could create a view or a query to just extract that as well.
Yeah, I think, that BBH is unique in that, and I think it's from like a support and client perspective and from my own vicinity too when I'm looking at it, because one person maybe just doing the entire mapping, in which case you need more information that may not be included in the fields that are in the model. So.
Sure. So. Yeah, but to your point, there's a lot of aggregations in CPO. Period over period mappings might not necessarily update the aggregation, but the sum of the part or the parts of the sum could change.
Right. Or new.
Build something to view your intermediate models. Yeah. Or build something to view both at the same time and then do a compare. Yeah. You build it once, you build it forever, right? It's a one-time tax.
I'd like to come back to the helpful query for a second. I feel like it's an easy application of those is for the enumerations that we have. Because not all the enumerations are performed in the form models. Most are, but not all of them. And some of those, we may have good examples in certain clients floating around now that we haven't supplied.
Yeah. So Rob was saying that enumerations, for example, is something super testable, but I think some form models don't always account for the explicit enumerations, and so further extrapolation of testing that stuff could be done there, or doing some sort of intermediate versus form model test to find what falls out is also something. Building inverse logic to your logic is also a great tool, right? I have built my case statement this way, but what happens whenever it's with the else statement? My else statement doesn't close out with every combination. What's the stuff that falls out? And here's all the records. What do I need to do with these? Those are also good testing protocols.
Yes, what I do, until the client says so, if it's just a case statement based on one field, I put that as the else, so I know the fallout, and I wait until the client goes back and says, okay, that's fine, let's just take that else out, let's put it as null.
That's a good point. So when a client gives you logic and says, there's no escape clause from here, you push back. We only map airtight logic. You might say, just make it null, fine, but I'm not going to say, if this, then do this, and that's the end of the statement whenever they bring in another value, and they say, well, just trust me. No, sorry, guys.
I don't trust my own mother, I don't trust you.
So, that's more mapping practice than testing, but you get the point. All right, we're at time. I will be following up with some emails here about kind of the process and the run rules, future going. I didn't get the turnout that I was hoping for, but tell your friends, tell your family about this, and we'll start instituting a lot of this stuff. And it is ultimately to save you time. This is not to give you any more work. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
What was I saying about physical preparation?